You know that incredibly specific feeling when you are deep in an argument. Maybe it's a multi-thread standoff in an internet comment section.
Mhm.
Or, maybe it's just a dispute in your own kitchen over who left the cabinet doors open again.
Right. Always the cabinets.
Yeah, always. And you are completely, undeniably right. Like you have the facts. You have the historical timeline of
Oh,
events.
you've got the receipts.
Exactly. You literally pull out your phone and you drop a hyperlink to concrete proof.
Hmm.
And you expect the other person to look at it, take a deep breath, and just say, "Oh, wow, I see the data. I was wrong. Thank you so much for correcting my flawed worldview."
Which, let's be real, that has not happened once in the entire history of human communication.
Never. Literally not once. Instead, they look at your concrete proof and they warp your words into something you didn't even say. They move the goalpost to a completely different topic.
Yeah, suddenly you're arguing about something from 3 years ago.
Right. And somehow, 20 minutes later, you are the one who looks totally unhinged while they just sit there looking like the calm voice of reason.
Hmm.
I mean, why are humans like this? We constantly tell ourselves that we are rational, hyperlogical creatures making decisions based on evidence, but everyday reality paints a completely different picture.
It really does. And the uncomfortable truth we are exploring in this deep dive is that facts, logic, and evidence are, well, they're essentially useless without psychological skill.
Useless. That is a brutal reality to accept, especially for those of us who pride ourselves on being objective.
I know, but we treat human conflict like an accounting problem, right?
Yeah.
We assume that if we just balance the ledger of facts, the dispute will naturally resolve itself. But humans are not spreadsheets. Truth without psychological skill loses to falsehood with psychological skill every single time.
Wow. Okay, so our mission today is to decode the mechanics of this. We are looking at a massive stack of sources covering cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, and even the mechanics of uh, conversational manipulation. We really want to figure out the invisible battles happening beneath the surface of our everyday conflicts.
Because once you understand the psychological game being played, you can actually spot the manipulation, you can control the frame of the argument.
And finally understand why dropping a massive truth bomb on someone is just a spectacular waste of time.
Exactly. And to get to the bottom of why logic fails, we have to start by looking at the biological hardware.
The actual brain stuff.
Right. Most of our listeners are probably familiar with the psychologist Robert Zijonk. His work from the 1980s essentially dismantled the whole idea that humans think before they feel. Zijonk showed that feelings actually precede thoughts.
Okay, so the emotion hits first.
Yes. But what's vital here is the actual mechanism. When you encounter a situation, maybe it's a piece of political news, or a perceived slight from a partner, your amygdala, which is the brain's emotional processing center, it reacts milliseconds before your prefrontal cortex even has a chance to boot up.
Wait, really? Milliseconds. So the biological alarm system is literally ringing before the logical data has even been unboxed.
Exactly. And because that emotional judgment happens first, your logical brain doesn't actually enter the situation as an objective scientist trying to find the truth.
Oh, man. What does it enter as?
It enters as a defense attorney. It's just trying to build a case for the emotional verdict that has already been handed down by the amygdala.
Okay, so basically, our logic is just the public relations department for our emotions.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Right, like the boss, which is our fragile ego or our tribal panic, makes a highly impulsive, totally irrational decision. And then it just tasks the PR department with scouring the internet for data points to make it look like a genius strategic move.
The PR analogy works so well because it highlights the illusion of objectivity. I mean, the PR department is very busy, they're very articulate, they produce lots of charts and graphs.
Lots of hyperlinks.
Yes, but it has absolutely no independent authority. And if we actually strip away that emotional boss, the PR department becomes totally paralyzed.
Wait, what do you mean paralyzed?
Well, the personal development author Steve Pavlina touches on this when he discusses the paradox of purely logical living. He points to cases of patients who suffer specific brain injuries, often to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, that completely sever their emotional capacity.
Okay, so if you lose your emotions,
Right.
you assume you just become this, like, hyper-efficient, hyper-logical machine, right? Like
Yeah.
a human supercomputer making perfect choices.
You would think so, but the exact opposite happens. They suffer from complete analysis paralysis because logic on its own provides absolutely no context for value.
Oh.
Yeah. A patient with this specific injury might be asked to choose a restaurant for dinner. And they will spend, like, 6 hours logically evaluating the seating arrangements, the lighting conditions, the font choices on the menu, the exact distance from their house.
But they can't actually pick one.
Exactly. They can never actually make a choice because logic cannot tell you that a cozy Italian place simply feels better than a sterile diner. Without emotion to assign weight or desire to a variable, logic just loops infinitely.
That is wild. And it totally strips away the entire myth of the data-driven argument. I mean, even a CEO who claims to only make cold, hard, data-driven decisions, they're still operating on a fundamental emotional premise.
Right. The feeling that growth is good or the absolute terror of the company failing.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you are bringing a bulleted list of facts to a debate with someone, you are fundamentally misunderstanding the operating system of the person you are talking to. You're trying to override an emotional baseline with a tool that was only ever designed to justify it.
And when you challenge that emotional baseline with undeniable facts, you trigger a massive biological crisis in the other person.
A crisis, just by presenting a fact.
Yes, because if logic is just the PR spin, presenting someone with a fact that proves their emotional reality is wrong, well, it doesn't make them reconsider. It forces their brain into crisis management. And this brings us to the realm of cognitive dissonance.
Oh, cognitive dissonance. The psychological pain of holding two contradictory beliefs. Like, we all know Leon Festinger's famous study of the UFO doomsday cult in the 1950s, right?
Oh, right, the seekers.
Yeah. The world was supposed to end, the aliens were supposed to pick them up in a flying saucer, and then literally nothing happened.
Nothing. But the mechanism of what happened the next morning is what we really need to examine here. Festinger noted that admitting they were wrong wasn't just a matter of saying, oops, my bad.
I mean, they had sold their homes, right?
Sold their homes, quit their jobs, alienated their entire families. The psychological cost of admitting they had destroyed their lives for a delusion was just way too high. The ego treats that level of identity collapse the same way the body treats a physical threat.
Like a literal bear attacking you.
Exactly. So to avoid ego death, the brain simply alters its perception of reality.
They spun it. Remember this. They claimed their faith was so strong that the aliens decided to spare the Earth.
They didn't just spin it, they believed it so deeply that they actually became more zealous. They started proselytizing harder. The dissonance was resolved by doubling down.
Which explains the internet perfectly.
It really does. And this mechanism explains a lot of the darker aspects of human history and modern society, too. The psychologist Elliot Aronson applied this to the Kent State University shootings in 1970, where unarmed students were killed by the National Guard. For the local townspeople, the cognitive dissonance was unbearable.
Because they needed to believe they lived in a safe, orderly society protected by good people, right? But the undeniable fact was that innocent kids were just gunned down in their own streets.
Right. To accept that fact means accepting that the world is terrifyingly random and that authority figures can be dangerously flawed. And the brain burns a massive amount of caloric energy trying to process a chaotic, unpredictable universe. So, to conserve energy and resolve the dissonance, many townspeople simply altered the narrative.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, they convinced themselves the victims must have been dangerous or radical or dirty in some way, and therefore they deserve to be shot.
Wow. This Melvin Lerner's just world hypothesis playing out in real time.
Yeah.
We have this desperate, hardwired need to believe that people get what they deserve. Because if bad things happen to good people for no reason, then bad things could happen to us.
Yeah.
So we warp our view of the victims to protect our own sense of invulnerability.
Exactly. Which means when you are arguing with someone online, or even dealing with a defensive family member, and they are vehemently denying basic facts or victim blaming, you aren't fighting their logic. You are fighting their fundamental biological need to feel safe.
You are threatening their emotional survival.
Yes. And when an organism's survival is threatened, it fights dirty.
Okay, so let's talk about how it fights dirty. Because our sources map out the specific defense mechanisms the brain deploys to protect its fragile ego from these dissonant facts. Psychologists call them cognitive distortions.
Right. These are the active filters the brain uses to basically rig the game against reality. And the most prevalent one in conflicts is emotional reasoning.
Emotional reasoning.
Yeah, it's the neurological shortcut where the brain assumes that because a feeling is intense, it must represent objective truth. So if I feel rejected by you, then you are objectively acting maliciously. The intensity of my internal emotion becomes the irrefutable evidence of your external guilt.
Oh my gosh, I see this constantly. You try to logically explain your intent, and they just say, well, it made me feel attacked, so you attacked me.
Right. The feeling retroactively creates the crime.
That is so frustrating. And then there's polarized thinking,
Huh.
the extreme black and white all or nothing filter. Why are humans so prone to this?
Yeah.
Like, why is nuance so incredibly difficult to introduce into an argument?
It comes back to cognitive load. Nuance requires holding multiple competing truths simultaneously, which demands significant activity in the prefrontal cortex. It burns calories.
Nuance is literally exhausting.
It is. Polarized thinking, categorizing someone as purely angelic or entirely evil, is a cheap, low-energy heuristic. If you are entirely evil, I don't have to critically evaluate any of my own behavior toward you. I am completely absolved.
Wow. The brain is just taking the path of least resistance to protect its own self-image. We have to add mind reading to that list too, where someone assumes they know your exact malicious intent without any evidence. I have lived this one. Someone decides that because I used a period instead of an exclamation point in a text message, I am furious with them.
Oh, text message mind reading is the worst.
It is. And if I try to solve that by sending a logical bulleted list of why I am not actually mad, I just look completely unhinged.
Because you are trying to use structural data to fix a distortion in their reality filter. It's like trying to fix a software glitch by yelling at the computer monitor. You cannot win a logical debate against someone engaging in emotional reasoning or polarized thinking because their internal rules of reality are actively rejecting your data to keep themselves safe.
Okay, so practically speaking, what is the play here? We have established that everyone is heavily armed with these cognitive distortions, and everyone is desperate to avoid the pain of cognitive dissonance. If the logic game is rigged, how do you actually survive a conflict?
You step off the logic board entirely. You have to start playing the psychological game. The dark psychology sources we reviewed focus heavily on a concept called frame control.
Frame control, okay.
Most people think arguments are about discovering the truth. They aren't. Arguments are battles over who controls the frame, the invisible boundary that dictates what the conflict is actually about, and who holds the burden of proof.
I want to make sure we nail this concept because it's huge. It's like drawing the lines on a tennis court, right? If you let the other person draw the boundaries of the court wherever they want, they will ensure you are always standing out of bounds no matter where you step.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Okay.
Let's apply it to a real situation. Say you walk into the kitchen, you left a cabinet open, and your partner says, "Why are you always so thoughtless and lazy?"
Okay, my immediate biological instinct is to recount my entire week of productivity. Like, I'm not lazy. I worked 10 hours yesterday. I did the laundry on Tuesday, and I organized the garage.
And the second you start listing your accomplishments,
That's a lot.
you have lost the argument. You accepted their frame. Their frame is that your core character is currently on trial. By defending yourself against the charge of laziness, you are implicitly agreeing that your character is the subject of the debate. You are playing on their tennis court.
Okay, I see the trap. So how do I break their frame and establish my own?
By refusing to accept the premise of the accusation, you close the cabinet and say, "I left the cabinet open, and I'll try to be more mindful of that, but I'm not going to entertain a conversation where an open cabinet is used as evidence that I am a thoughtless person."
You separate the action from the identity.
Yes. Or you can reflect the frame back onto them. You say, "I notice you often escalate small oversights into massive character attacks. What is actually stressing you out today?"
Oh, wow. So now the frame is no longer my cabinet. The frame is their pattern of extreme communication.
Exactly. You aren't avoiding responsibility for the cabinet, but you are absolutely refusing to litigate your entire personality.
There's a specific tool the sources mention for this called strategic concession. The idea is that you agree to a small, obvious truth to neutralize it as a weapon while holding incredibly firm on the core boundary. But I have to push back on this a little.
Okay, go ahead.
Conceding feels dangerously close to losing. Like, if someone is yelling at me and I can see that they have a point about one thing, doesn't that just give them ammunition to use against me later?
It feels like surrender, I get that. But structurally, it is a massive power move. When someone attacks you with a mix of truth and exaggeration, say they yell, "You never listen to me and you're always making this relationship about yourself," they are expecting you to deny the whole thing.
Right, they want the fight.
They want you to fight the never listen part so they can prove you wrong. By strategically conceding, you say, "You know what, my mind was wandering earlier and I apologize for not listening well, but I completely reject the idea that I make this relationship about myself. Give me a specific example of that."
Oh, I see the mechanics now. By owning the small flaw, I look incredibly secure and reasonable, which totally ruins their narrative that I'm being defensive.
Exactly.
And by demanding a specific example for the larger, exaggerated claim, I am forcing the burden of proof entirely onto them.
You neutralize their best weapon by agreeing with it, and it leaves them holding only their unprovable exaggerations. If they cannot provide a specific example after you just calmly conceded a fault, their distortion becomes obvious even to them.
Okay, controlling the frame makes perfect sense in a sterile environment. But we are talking about doing this in the heat of the moment when your amygdala is screaming at you to defend your honor.
And that biological hurdle is exactly what makes frame control so difficult. It's why manipulators rely on your nervous system betraying you. The pioneering psychologist Paul Ekman described emotions as a runaway train.
A runaway train.
Yeah, the physiological response, the racing heart, the flush of adrenaline starts before your conscious mind can even register the trigger. People who habitually manipulate arguments rely on this biological lag.
So they intentionally provoke the runaway train. They poke and prod until you finally snap and raise your voice.
Because once you snap, they can use your emotional reaction as tangible evidence that you are the problem. They'll say,
Wow.
wow, look how aggressive you're getting. I can't even have a rational conversation with you.
Oh, I hate that so much.
Right. Suddenly, your reaction to their abuse becomes the focal point of the argument and completely erasing whatever they did to provoke you in the first place.
It's totally maddening. So how do we override our own nervous system? Like, how do we actually stop the runaway train?
You deploy a combination of two tactics, exposing the mechanic and utilizing strategic silence.
Exposing the mechanic. What does that look like?
It means you stop arguing about the content of the conversation and start labeling the tactical behavior. If they twist your words, you don't defend the twisted words. You say, that is a straw man argument. I am not going to defend a point I didn't make.
Okay.
If they change the subject when they are losing, you say, I see we're moving the goalpost because you don't want to address the original point.
So you act like a referee instead of a player. You just blow the whistle and name the penalty.
Exactly.
I love that. And the second tactic, strategic silence. Honestly, that sounds like the hardest thing to execute. I mean, everyone wants that Aaron Sorkin moment, right? Where you deliver a rapid-fire, brilliant monologue that completely dismantles your opponent's entire worldview.
We all want the Sorkin monologue, but it requires the other person to be a rational actor willing to be dismantled. In reality, filling the air with a desperate monologue just signals to the other person that their opinion controls your emotional state. It shows you cannot tolerate the discomfort of their disapproval. Strategic silence flips that dynamic completely.
Wait, so when they launch a wild, distorted accusation at you, you just look at them.
You look at them calmly and you let the silence stretch
Oh,
out.
that sounds so awkward.
It is. But when someone makes an absurd claim, they expect you to immediately scramble to fill the void with defensive panic. When you refuse to do that, the silence acts as a mirror. Without your chaotic reaction to distract from it, their absurd statement just hangs in the air.
Just floating there.
Exactly. The silence forces them to sit in the extreme discomfort of their own cognitive distortion.
That is amazing.
Oh.
The person who appears more emotional always appears less rational. So if you can just withstand the adrenaline, name their tactic, and let the silence do the heavy lifting, you literally starve their manipulation of the oxygen it needs to survive.
Synthesizing everything we've looked at today, the through line is really clear. Human beings are structurally unequipped to handle pure logic in the face of an emotional threat.
Yeah.
Sejong showed us that our feelings dictate the verdict before logic even enters the courtroom. Festinger and Aronson demonstrated the extreme lengths our ego will go to, including altering our perception of reality and victim blaming, just to avoid the pain of cognitive dissonance.
Which means treating an argument like a factual debate is a losing strategy. We have to navigate the cognitive distortions, the polarized thinking, and the emotional reasoning by recognizing that every conflict is actually a battle for frame control.
Yeah.
And I want to be very clear to you, the listener, as we wrap this up. Understanding these mechanics doesn't mean you should become some dark psychology manipulator.
No, definitely not. Learning how a lock works doesn't make you a burglar. It allows you to build a better door. This knowledge gives you immunity.
Right.
When you can see the matrix of cognitive distortions and frame manipulation, you regain your agency. You get to choose whether to engage, how to reframe the conversation, or when to simply walk away and let the other person shadowbox with their own ego.
And it brings us to a really important final concept from Steve Pavlina's work, heart-brain coherence. Because after spending this entire deep dive exposing the flaws and the defensive traps of our emotional brains, the takeaway is not that we should try to kill our emotions and become cold, detached robots.
Right. The emotional brain isn't a flaw in the system. It is an ancient, highly evolved instrument. It is the source of empathy, connection, and unconditional love. Logic is just the GPS, but emotion is the destination.
I really like that.
Yeah, our logic is simply meant to help us navigate the path that our deeper values set. Heart-brain coherence happens when our logical analysis and our emotional values are working together in harmony.
But when we get sucked into a toxic internet debate or a kitchen standoff, we lose that coherence. We get hijacked by our amygdala's desperate need to be right and to protect our fragile self-image.
Yes.
So the next time you find yourself furiously typing a bulleted list of facts, or you have that hyperlink queued up and ready to destroy someone's argument, take a breath, pause the runaway train, and ask yourself a question. Are you actually trying to connect with this person and change their mind? Or are you just trying to soothe your own cognitive dissonance? Something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.